Welcome to the Contract Academy. We explain some important aspects from the repertoire of our courses at regular intervals. Today's topic is written contracts and verbal amendments. We wish you a lot of fun and success in your work.
Are written contracts and verbal changes to them valid? In many cases, it is in the interests of the contracting parties that verbal agreements are excluded. To do this, write the following sentence in your terms and conditions. The contract and changes to it are only concluded if confirmed in writing. However, the law in Germany has declared that such an agreement to be ineffective. If the contract is made in writing, this clause is meaningless. If, on the other hand, the contract is confirmed verbally, the verbal confirmation takes precedence because it was agreed individually. In particular, a clause in the general terms and conditions requiring written form is not regularly effective. An oral agreement, as it is an individual agreement, is effective regardless of whether it is required in writing. However, anyone who invokes an oral agreement bears the burden of proof. It should be noted that a change agreed orally on the phone is also binding. The priority of the individual agreement, according to paragraph 305 BGB, applies. In order to avoid a dispute, it is therefore better not to make any verbal promises about deviating regulations. It should be noted that with other national legal forms, for example Anglo-American law, the above clause on the written form is also valid.
Why exists a double and single written form requirement under German law? A simple written form clause has the disadvantage that the contracting parties can revoke this clause by verbally changing the contract. Therefore, in practice, one often comes across the so-called double written form clause, which is also called qualified written form clause. This includes both an oral and a written change to the written form clause. A subsequent amendment to the contract is then only possible in writing.
In practice, it can only be determined, by interpreting the contract, whether the parties wanted to agree on a written form, according to sections 133 and 157 of the German Civil Code. A distinction is made, whether such clause was intended for evidence purposes, means declaratory, or as a requirement for effectiveness, which means then a constitutive written form clause. If the interpretation does not lead to a result, the presumption of section 125 applies. According to this, an agreed written form is a prerequisite for the validity of the legal transaction. A legal transaction is then ineffective, means void, if the written form was not adhered to.
Did you like the content, and are you interested in topics related to contract and claims management? Then we look forward to your registration for our newsletter.